man's heart is full of hate. He butthurts, cries, and a dark shadow falls over this troll. From the ashes of a once great fandom has risen a meme, an LOL that must be liked. We look to the airwaves for a vindicator, someone to strike fear in the dark basement of the parents who created him. The battle between fan and smart has begun. With a head on his shoulders stands the smart fan, a speaker of truths, with a voice of silence, and a radio show of justice. This is Ring Rust.
I'm in a bit of a rare situation here where I don't have any show to preview or review. So, like back, what was that, almost 10 years ago now, when they had the last brand split, there was a time when, there was this like little sliver of space where people who did wrestling podcasts or wrestling radio shows or just discussed wrestling on a weekly basis had, on that particular basis, nothing to talk about. I mean, there's plenty of news I got here, but, there's just, wrestling show-wise, there's not really anything to talk about. There's no TNA pay-per-view, there's no WWE pay-per-view, there's no Ring of Honor pay-per-view. So, anyway, so let's just do some news then. From the if you want to follow along the story I'm about to read, hop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page. Click on like if you haven't already, and so scroll on down to the Impact Wrestling story. They've scheduled more TV tapings starting January 4th, 2017, and concluding on January 10th. Despite the constant uncertainty surrounding the company's future, TNA is still moving forward with plans to tape TV in 2017. As previously reported, they currently have TNA Impact episodes taped through early December, and will tape a special episode of Total Nonstop Deletion from Matt Hardy's compound in North Carolina.
This is a great catch, it's on Slam Wrestling News Radio on Ring Rust, CHMR 93.5 FM.
This is Fabio Mark Jabroni. You are listening to Ring Rust. If you want to follow along the story I'm about to read, pop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page, click on like if you haven't already, and scroll on down to the NXT TakeOver Toronto post. Coming out of this week's NXT episode, below is the updated announced card for NXT TakeOver Toronto during Survivor Series weekend on November 19th. NXT Championship match will see Samoa Joe challenging Shinsuke Nakamura. NXT Women's Championship match will see my future ex-wife number 15, Mickie James, challenging my secret girlfriend, Asuka. I'm so torn. What am I going to do? Who am I going to cheer for? Oh, both of them. Oh, that's how that works. Okay, finals for the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, and Bobby Roode will be taking on Ty Dillinger. You're listening to Ring Rust Redux on Jabronology TV. Later, of course, after Ring Rust, which I'm hosting right now, sort of sideways sort of way of doing it anyway. So if you want to follow along the story I'm about to read from, pop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page, click on like if you haven't already, and scroll on down to the story about Bill Goldberg. As previously reported, Old Whisker Biscuits expected to wrestle Brock Lesnar on November 20th at Survivor Series in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. According to sources, Goldberg's only scheduled for one match. That's why he referred to Lesnar as next and last during the promo on WWE Raw in Denver, Colorado. The deal for Bill's return was put together over the past few weeks and finalized about 2 weeks ago. It was also noted that the former WCW World Heavyweight Champion could end up working more than one match if he gets a good reaction, and judging by the reaction of his return on Monday, he's definitely expected to. Even in 2016, which is after he was really last really relevant. He wasn't, his last WWE run wasn't really even all that good, but, you know, he was, he was what he was. He still is more or less what he was, I guess. So we'll see how this particular invasion turns out. You're listening to Ring Rust Redux on Jabronology TV. So if you want to follow along the story I'm about to read from, pop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page. Click on like if you haven't already. And scroll on down to Meet the WWE's Scariest New Wrestler, Crazy Mary Dobson. This is brought to us by Maximum. The WWE announced 3 new additions to its roster on Wednesday, and one of them is a young lady who we'd like to call your attention to. Her name is Crazy Mary Dobson, and she's kind of scary. In its release introducing the wrestlers, the WWE says that the 23-year-old has 5 years of wrestling experience and has, quote, toured throughout the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and Europe, as well as Japan, unquote. She's also got a great gimmick as a horror-loving scream queen. She's been known to enter the ring in a Jason Voorhees mask, creepy contacts, and face paint. Crazy Mary has already performed a few times in the WWE's developmental brand NXT, and this latest announcement has led to broad speculation that she may arrive in the WWE as Bray Wyatt's as-yet unseen Sister Abigail. Maybe. But also, maybe not. What's clear, though, is that Crazy Mary is one to keep an eye on. So, if you actually remember the original thing about Sister Abigail, she's dead. She can't show up in WWE. She's dead. The character of Sister Abigail is no longer with us. So unless unless Bray Wyatt himself doesn't know that Sister Abigail is still alive, then fill your boots, I guess. So we'll see how that turns out. She may appear in vignettes or something, just like on the Titantron. She may be the embodiment of Sister Abigail on a Titantron, but as a performer, I hope not, anyway. Just me personally, and probably a good portion of the internet wrestling community who knows of such things, remembers such things, that, Sister Abigail's supposed to be dead. So, unless he does some sort of, voodoo incantation in the middle of the ring and there's, smoke coming out of some kind of coffin or something, and then up she comes, well, that's still wrestle crap, I suppose. But anyway...
You there! What's your story?
I'm Ernie Devlin, and I don't question it.
Oh, I like that. Don't budge. I'm taking your mind. Mind encryption, perhaps?
Oh, is it hot in here? Or was I just engulfed in flames? And broads.
Hey, what's up? This is referee Tony S., and you're listening to Ring Rust on CHMR.
This is Simon Mark Shabroni. You're listening to Ring Rust. You want to follow along the story I'm about to read? Pop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page. Click on like if you haven't already. And scroll on down to the story about Roderick Strong. The former Ring of Honor wrestling champion made his WWE NXT debut this week as Austin Aries' mystery partner in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. WWE officials are already high on Strong and were impressed by his debut. You're listening to Ring Rust Redux on Jabronology TV.
This is 93.5 CHMR FM.
Ring Rust presents Macho Facts. Randy Savage doesn't throw up when he drinks too much. He throws down. And the Macho Man grinds his own coffee with his teeth and boils the water with his rage. me on Facebook, tinyurl.com/ringrust. Follow me on Twitter at Mark Jabroni. And subscribe to Jabronology TV, youtube.com/fanboy Mark Jabroni.
Solve your own problem. If you want to follow along with the story I'm about to read, pop on over to the aforementioned CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page. Click on like if you haven't already, and scroll on down to yet another story about TNA, actually. Refresh it if you're already there. Refresh the page, because it just posted about a little while ago. So, sources are stating that TNA will likely file for bankruptcy in the hopes of absolving their increasingly mounting debt. There's no current indication as to what would happen after that, but as of now, chief creditors include Aerolux, Billy Corgan, and the Fight Network from here in Canada. Dixie Carter apparently doesn't want to look bad. Quote, the whole thing is Dixie's still trying to figure out a way that this is why it hasn't been sold. I don't know if it's to stay in control, but the whole thing is she doesn't want to look bad publicly, unquote. No word on if Impact Wrestling would be filing Chapter 7 or Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's possible Dixieland could stay alive if they filed for Chapter 11, but Chapter 7 would likely mean the end of the company. So I'm still going to be hopeful that something positive can still come out of it, but I may be the only one. You are listening to Ring Rust REDUX on Jabronology TV. That was terrible. This is Fanboy Mark Jabroni. You are listening to Ring Rust. So if you want to follow along the story I'm about to read from, I'm not really going to read from, I'm just going to sort of reference it, and you can read it, because it's a bit long, so I don't want to subject you to that. I'm just going to let you read it if you want to read it, and if you're not interested, then don't read it. I'm not your dad. So, pop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page, click on like if you haven't already, and scroll on down to the story about James Ellsworth, who recently sat down with WBZ CBS Boston to promote his WWE World Heavyweight Championship match against AJ Styles on this week's episode of SmackDown Live, which you've probably already seen, likely, by now. So, yeah. Man, check out that interview. It's full of chinless abandon.
Hello, friends out there in Radio Land. Place your hands upon the radio right now. This is Reverend Billy Seawards from the First House of Polyester Worship down here in the sunny state of Florida, telling you that you're listening to an oasis of decency in today's cultural wasteland of FM radio. That's right, friends. You're listening to Mon Radio 93.5 CHMR FM, your only station that matters on the FM dial. Amen.
Yeah, I've had Windows boot up faster than you. Come on, get a move on.
Rocket!
Brunt.
Featuring music from My Future Ex-Wife number 15, Mickie James, who's making a return, of course, to WWE via NXT. Much in the same way Samoa Joe went to NXT, I guess. And Shinsuke Nakamura went to NXT, and Austin Aries, and all these other wrestlers who are considered veterans, you know, in the world outside of WWE, they're considered veterans, so they went. I mean, especially Samoa Joe, who's in his 30s? In his 40s, maybe? I'd have to look it up. He's not a spring chicken. Of course, Rhino made his return to WWE in NXT as well, for like much the same way that Samoa Joe made his debut within WWE. So, I mean, tried and tested methodology for making new wrestlers better is to put them up against older wrestlers, more established wrestlers who have experience that they can benefit from. So, there it is. That's the reasoning. So, this is Fanboy Mark Jabroni. You are listening to Ring Rust. If you want to follow along the story I'm about to read, pop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page. Click on like if you haven't already, and scroll on down to the story about what's coming up next week on Raw. So the main event for next week's Raw in Minneapolis, Minnesota, we'll see a non-title triple threat match with WWE Universal Champion Kevin Owens, Chris Jericho, and Seth Rollins. Also set for next week is another non-title match with WWE Raw Tag Team Champions The New Day, taking on Cesaro and Sheamus. The two teams will battle with the title on the line at Hell in a Cell later this month. Brock Lesnar will also be appearing next week on that episode of Raw.
Like me on Facebook, tinyurl.com/ringrust. Follow me on Twitter @MarkJabroni. And subscribe to Jabronology TV, youtube.com/fanboymarkjabroni.
This is Fanboy Mark Jabroni. You're listening to Ring Rust. So the last story I'll be reading from this week, before heading on to the some special guests doing a show coming up. If you want to pop on over to the CHMR's Ring Rust Facebook page, click on like if you haven't already, and follow along, scroll on down to the story about Hideo Itami. As noted, he was pulled from the NXT Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic due to a neck injury he suffered a few weeks back. Word is that Itami will be out of action for just 2 months, indicating he doesn't need surgery. He could have been out of action for more than 6 months if he did, in fact, require surgery, but thankfully for him and for us, who are going to be able to watch him wrestle again that much sooner, he shouldn't require surgery. So good luck, Mr. Itami, Hideo Itami-san, I believe is how you pronounce it. Or is it Hideo-san? I think. I'll have to ask Nami next time I see her.
That's it for another show, kiddies. Check me out on Facebook, where you can keep track of all the news that's right on the mark, from around ringside to the latest concerts. See you at the shows. Later days.
This is 93.5 CHMR FM.